Okay, so congratulations, you have made it to the end of your Excel homework for the class. So if it was absolute torture, congratulations, you don't have to do this anymore. But hopefully it allowed you to get around and play around and feel a little bit more comfortable. Certainly in future classes, if you're taking EDL D618, you're going to play around with SPSS, which has a lot more functionality and is a little bit more complicated, but I think Excel, for what it offers, it does a good job once you get in and kind of figure out what's going on. So today we're looking at correlation, and that's on pages 96 and 97 of your Excel Quick Guide book. So again, just a reminder, correlation, we're looking at relationships. So we're looking specifically in this test at the Pearson product moment correlation. Pearson R between two variables. So I'm actually going to pull the exact example from pages 96 and 97 in that Excel quick guide. So asking the question, what is a correlation or relationship between number of years teaching and teaching skills? So this is one that's probably very real for a lot of us. I think, the more you teach, obviously, or hopefully, you never know, your skills begin to increase. So we're going to look at this with some dummy data. So we have our variables here. We have our identifying factors. So whatever our participants were, we've numbered them 1 to 20. Then we have years teaching and teaching skills, and that was on a scale from 1 to 10. So if we're looking at our variables, our years teaching, that is going to be our independent variable. It's the predictor, right? The number of years teaching is going to, maybe, we'll see, predict the teaching skill. We're seeing if that is the relationship there. And so that's going to actually be on our x-axis, or that horizontal axis, on our scattergram, which we're going to create in just a minute. And so then our teaching skills, that variable, that is going to be our criterion, or the dependent variable. And it's going to be on the y-axis, and it's going to be that vertical axis that we're looking at. So now I've been talking about it. What I want to do is actually highlight this information, select my data, and I'm going to go to Insert. And then if you go to the middle of your options up in this kind of menu bar, you're going to see Enter Scatter. And I'm going to select a scattergram or scatter plot. And then I actually did not select my variable, so what I want to do is I'm just going to name it. I'll just do years teaching and teaching skills. And then if you look below, just as we were talking about our variables here and where they appear, so we've got the years teaching. Looks like the most taught is somewhere maybe 31, 32, something like that. And then we've got our scale here for teaching skills. So it goes up to 12, but actually our highest data point is at a 10. So if we look at this scattergram a little bit more carefully, we want to start to examine what it means, what it tells us, right? So we can definitely see that there is a positive correlation happening here, right? As years teaching increases, so does, sort of in a general sense, the teaching skill rating over on this side. So it is a positive correlation. Now it's not a perfect correlation, where if it were, we would see this beautiful linear line that just is spectacular. We don't see that here, for sure. So it's not perfect, but it is definitely a positive correlation. Now we might want to know a little bit more about the magnitude of that correlation, and that is where we're going to look at the Pearson R test. We're going to look at what the strength of it is. So I'm going to go to data up at the top, and I'm going to select data analysis. We've got correlation that pops up here. And for my input range, I'm going to select all of this data, not my identifying factors here, but I'm going to pull my labels for the variables as well as the data underneath them. And then I want to be sure that this box that says labels in first row is selected, because we're going to want to include these in the output. And then, speaking of the output, I'm going to select where I want it. So I always like to do this just to be sure that's where I want it. And then I'm going to press OK. Alright, so you can see it spit out our variables, and then it gave us our Pearson R. Now there are a lot of decimals there, so we may not want that. You can see in the book it only gives you 2 decimal points, So a few of you had questions about how to change these things. If you're trying to make a general change to the whole column, you can just select it like this and then go here. And if you wanted to go to numbers or currency, percentage, fractions, whatever you're sort of looking for, you can make that adjustment to the whole column. I don't want to do that. I just want to adjust this particular cell. So I'm going to go to my decimal decrease, or decrease decimal, I can't read apparently, and I'm going to just take this over to 0.67. So that is my Pearson R. So when I think about that, I'm going to think back to the PowerPoint where we have the number line that we're looking at. You should be able to find it. I think I put it up there a few times, a couple of times. And so the number line has a 0 in the middle. It has a -1 all the way over to the left and a +1 all the way over to the right. When we're looking at our 0.67, it's going to fall somewhere between the 0 and the +1, right? Closer to the +1. So if you look at the words that are underneath, sort of associated with that number line, you're going to find 0.67 to be somewhere between moderate and strong. Maybe not all the way over to strong. So it's a moderate correlation or relationship, and that lines up with what we see here. It's not this perfect line, but it is certainly something that's worth noting, right? We know something about this year's teaching does have a relationship to the skill level of the teacher, at least based on the data that we're looking at here. So I think it's important to kind of look back and forth between the scattergram and then also what your Pearson R provides you with when you're playing around with your data. And so normally I would put another example up here, but I actually think if you want to, this is a great opportunity for you to start to play around with maybe the variables that you came up with for your research final paper. Even if you don't have the data, come up with 10 data points or 20 data points and kind of play around with it and see what you get. And then if you have questions, we can go from there. But this might be a good starting point to get familiar with the data. So enjoy your very last homework exercise. Again, if you have questions, reach out, but otherwise, hopefully this was maybe the least painful one of all of the assignments that we've had to do. All right, thanks.